Hey guys, hello and welcome to Spud Life with me, your host, Tatty Tim. Okay, so without further ado, let's crack on with this week's episode. So it's music part 2, here we go. So, it's 1980, I'm just starting senior school, totally unaware that I'm about to live through and become part of the most insane generational youth culture experience known to mankind. Is that a bit extreme? But I mean, the 80s was mad, and I was just about to unknowingly live through it and all it had to offer. The good, the bad, the weird, the ugly, Adam and the Ants, all sorts of shit. So, and I think this episode is going to explain a lot of that, go through a lot of my reinventions that I did and had, and explaining why and how I did certain things. We'll touch on all sorts of stuff in this episode. It's probably when you were living through it, you thought the 80s was absolutely crap. It was. I'll get to stories later on in this episode about me and my friends sitting there, and we were like discussing the 80s and how shit it was. But was it? You know, I mean, now kids are kind of dressing like we used to, and everything from that era is now back in vogue, isn't it? You know, vinyl. How weird is vinyl that it's come back? I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love vinyl, even though I've still got a record player anymore. But it's mad to think that the guys and the kids now think it's so cool, whereas it was just a norm for us. And then when all the new technology came in, we kind of embraced that and want to listen to vinyl anymore and have that pain in the arse of turning a record over when you want to listen to side 2 and, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So sit back, buckle up and enjoy the 80s. We're living in the 80s. 1980, so I'm 12 years old. Am I 12? Hang on, let me do the maths on this one. So I was spawned in 1968, so that means 68. Yeah, I was 12 years old. Yeah, good to that. So, yep, 12 years old. Going to the big school. Start of the 80s. What could possibly go wrong? Let's find out. So if you remember back in the past episode, I said obviously I was into Blondie and the Jam and the Police, and I was just looking at the charts on this from the 80s, and Don't Stand So Close to Me was in the charts of peaked at number 1 for the Police, which was a really good song. He obviously didn't. Well, I didn't get what it was on about at the time. Obviously, it's when you grow up and you look. There's so many songs that I didn't get the lyrics for. I just like the tune, and I kind of like the song. You know the song, but you wouldn't necessarily understand the connotations of the song. And obviously, we all know what Don't Stand So Close to Me is about, with the police, the old stingy boy being used to be a school teacher and all that. So, yeah, you kind of get it now, but you didn't at the time. So that was in the charts. Blondie had so many hits in the charts back then in the 1980s. I'm just looking at them now. So we got, where are you? The Tide Is High, Call Me, Atomic, you know, absolute, some of the best songs. So all this was going on, and we were like talking about this in the playground after Thursday nights, on watching it on Top of the Pops. It was just a norm. Did you see So-and-so on Top of the Pops? It was fantastic. There's obviously a big classic one coming up in a few years' time when we'll get into that shortly, about a certain pop star. Is it a girl or a boy? You know what I'm talking about, guys. But yeah, so then Going Underground was there by the Jam. There was so many mad stuff. Obviously, Jonah Lewis, Stop the Cavalry. That was Christmas number 1 that year. How weird's that? God, that's going so back. Pretenders, Brass in Pocket, Olivia Newton-John, Xanadu with ELO. And there's so many Birmingham bands in, like what they're called, Dixie's Midnight Runners, and Gino was up there in the charts. It got to number 1 in 1980, and they still play that in bloody warehouse, don't they? I think they do. So, but there was so many stuff going on, and I think this is where one of the big sort of bands and the big influences for me back then was a band called Madness. Yes, we all know those songs. So I think that's when I got into my first reinventive stage, when I became a bit of a rude boy. So I was big into ska. It meant because we'd gone from that sort of youngster phase where you have to kind of do what your parents want you to do, so to speak, in a certain sort of way. And now you're becoming a bit more rebellious, well I was anyway, and a bit more of my own sort of person. And then obviously I had two cousins, and they were big in, one was a skinhead and one was into ska, and he was like a rude boy. So rude boys, for people that don't know, they were kind of like, well, they were called Suedeheads back in the 60s, and it was like guys that were into sort of the Jamaican sort of reggae and ska that was coming over from Jamaica into the towns and cities where the guys from Jamaica had moved across from and into. So these were all guys that grew up and lived together and worked together, and obviously just enjoyed the culture and the music that these West Indian guys were bringing across. And all those records, there's a sort of fantastic documentary a couple of weeks ago actually about this, and it was phenomenal because the guys were just waiting for the records coming in from Jamaica with the new guys, and it was guys like Desmond Decker and the Aces, Prince Buster, Toots and the Maytals, the Ethiopians, and Millie Small, all these fabulous sort of Jamaican recording artists that were getting their music across, and the guys from in the UK that were listening to it just resonated with that sort of young white working class guys that was living with and growing up with the other West Indian guys in their streets. And these were the children of the original sort of immigrants that came across in the sort of 1950s and the early 60s that built up the labour shortage that was needed after the Second World War. So yeah, it was a great, absolutely fantastic cultural phenomenon that spawned some of the most amazing music and some of the most amazing street fashions and youth culture that probably the world's ever seen. It was awesome. The music from Jamaica is unbelievable. We're not just talking reggae. I mean, even now, some of the stuff that comes across from there is unbelievable. I've got a massive sort of collection of reggae and ragga and dancehall stuff that is phenomenal. You just can't help but tap your feet and groove to that sort of stuff. So anyway, those guys, they were the originals. And then in early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, there was a renaissance of sort of ska, and a lot of guys from them, basically they were all from the Midlands, I think they're all from, and most of them for like the Specials were from Coventry. I think Madness were the only ones that were from sort of down south, and I don't think we ever even really, that was a major factor in it. It was just the fact that we really loved the music and we loved the sort of style of dress, the black and white of the two-tone sort of label, and the sort of grittiness of the songs. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like you could get up and dance, but it also had a bit of oomph to it. People, they seemed serious when they were singing. Like I say, I was 12 years old. I wasn't particularly into what they were talking about or singing about. Any political views that went whoa right over the top of my head. It was just like, it was the fashion, it was the style. Style has always been a massive thing for me. Even to this day, it's I think style is great, and it doesn't matter at what level of life you're at, you need to have style. You really do. It's kind of like, and it can just be your own thing, but I think style just sort of makes something even better, doesn't it? Can you imagine, I don't know, if, say, Elvis Presley didn't have style, or James Dean, or, there's so many iconic figures that have got a particular style, and their style has spawned, a complete movement from it. So I think that's always been with me. all my reinventions that we're going to talk about, they've always been purely based on I think more the style factor was more important than the music in a lot of ways. Maybe not more important, but definitely on a level paring. It was, I think if something's got awesome style, then I'll more likely to be geared towards it, I'm more likely to sway towards it than if something's not. I think that's why nowadays, with everything being such mediocre, nobody seems to have any style anymore. They're all just clones of one another, aren't they? It's so sad, really. It is. It's really sad. It's like when I talked to my daughter about this years ago. I made her watch Quadrophenia. I think I've already said that, haven't I? But I made her watch Quadrophenia, and it was just purely for the fact, and she really did enjoy it. But it's more to do with the fact of showing the different youth cultures that there were then. I mean, even that resonated with me back now, back then in 1980, in the 80s when it sort of came out. I think it just showed the styles. I mean, more so perhaps the mods were more stylish than the rockers. I think with the rockers it was more of a practical sort of solution to what the motorbikes that they rode, the leathers, the heavy big boots, and the sort of, what's the point of having a nice neat haircut and they usually were into the more sort of rock and rolly sort of things, weren't they, back then, to be perfectly honest. But then you get the mods that were into the nice Italian suits, the Italian scooters, and the sort of ex-military parkers. It was all about the style, and then the music sort of married really well with the style, didn't it? If you're dressed smartly, you got a nice neat haircut, you're clean shaven, and you ride around on a nice scooter, a nice shiny little scooter, and you look the part. If you're a face, if anyone's watched Quadrophenia, you know what a face is. And then you're not going to start listening to, I don't know, what would it have been at the time, Jerry Lee Lewis and even Elvis perhaps, but some of the sort of rock and roll sort of tunes back then. It was this new sort of Motowny sound, wasn't it? And the R&B that was coming out back then, bands like Small Faces, Spencer Davis Group, the Yardbirds, all sort of great. Oh mate, they are great British bands, absolutely phenomenal. And obviously they became some of the rock gods of the 20th century, didn't they? But yeah, so it's all this style thing. I think a lot of it all boils down to style, and I think with me in particular, like I just said, style. If you ain't got style, you ain't got nothing, man. And again, I suppose style, it's like art, isn't it? It's subjective. What some people think is really stylish, other people think is the most awful thing they've ever seen in their life. So just do your own thing. That's what I say. If you enjoy what you look like and enjoy how you look and how you sound and how you feel, that's fan-bloody-tastic, because that's all that you need. So there we go. It was Madness, I think, spawned. No, I don't think it probably was Baggy Trousers. It was around about the same time Baggy Trousers, and then there was Too Much Too Young came out by the Specials, and I think it was that for me that pushed me into that ska sort of era. It was the look, they had little trilby hats, the sort of the white socks. We all wore white socks then, so it was white socks, black shoes, sort of as drain pipey as you could, school trousers, and you wore your tie in this tight little, so you'd actually turn it round, so like the kippery type bit of it, you tuck that into inside your shirt, and you'd have the thin bit of your tie with the tiniest little knot on it. I mean, kids they just don't even have proper ties today. They just have these clip-on things. But back then you had to have an actual proper tie. So you'd tie your tie in with this little tiny knot, and you'd have the thin bit of the tie out the front, and you'd think you were cool as hell. So you'd be there walking to school with your white socks on and your loafers, and we'd have these loafers that were like, I don't even know where I got my money from then. I had a paper round, and we used to do like odd jobs and stuff. But I suppose things were cheaper then, and you just made stuff last, didn't you? And you didn't need a lot to get the look. Do you know what I'm saying? So, like with the loafers, that was all you needed to complete the look, really, as of a rude boy. They did these. There wasn't a lot to it. There was like a Fred Perry shirt, a short, not quite a skinhead, but a short sort of cropped haircut, white socks, black loafers. You could have some sort of skinny jeans when you were out. Well, they weren't skinny jeans then, they were just like drain pipe jeans, and we used to bleach them. And it was funny because I've just done an interview actually with Queggs, the grammar school, the local grammar school. They're relaunching their school newspaper, and they asked me if I wouldn't mind doing their first interview to relaunch the paper. So I think it's going digital as well. I think it's online as well. I had a great time. We were there nearly 2 hours. I was talking to a young lad called James, and he was fantastic. His musical knowledge was astounding. I mean, he was into so much good stuff. I couldn't believe it. It gave me faith in the youth again, to put it that way. He knew his stuff, man. He was a good lad. And I was explaining to him about how back then you couldn't go to a shop like you can now and buy sort of skinny jeans and all these different things and clothes and fashion accessories to put you in a particular tribe that you may want to belong to. Back then, you just had to either make it, or you had a friend's mom that had a sewing machine, and she would like turn your jeans in. So you'd go down the market and you'd buy a pair of jeans, and then you'd come back home, and they weren't ripped, or all you could buy back then was jeans, simple as. Different makes. I think Levi's were the most expensive as usual, but you could get some sort of. You could get knockoff Levi's, obviously, but then you could just get a normal pair of jeans. I don't think it was a particularly, in my circle of friends, it wasn't a particularly, you didn't really need Levi's, as long as you had the look, that was all that mattered. So anyway, Martin's mum, she was the sort of seamstress of the local lads. So you take your jeans down and she'd turn them in, and then she'd turn them in for you. And then you'd get that sort of drain pipey look, the look I'm talking about, not skinny but tight-ish, you know what I'm saying. And then what we do then is we take them upstairs and we put them in the bath with a load of bleach, and you sort of screw them up. So you'd screw them up as if you were, like when you were a kid and you used to, when you've been swimming and you used to get the towel and you used to spin it around and then flick someone on the arse with the towel. You know what I'm saying? Or was that just me? But you know how the towel went all sort of screwed up. So you'd screw your jeans up like that sort of way, and you'd leave them in the bath. But the secret was to get the bleach and water ratio correct. Otherwise, you'd wear them once and then they'd just fall apart because bleach would just wreck them. But you can imagine the look that came out. So after that, you'd have this kind of like tie-dye, bleachy, how can you describe it? Kind of like jaggedy, tigery print sort of look. Do you know what I'm saying? It was all the bleach, so it was like blue and white. So it looked pretty cool actually. And then you turn them up. So you turn them up, but really thin. So like I wear turn-ups now on my jeans, and I like them quite big. But back then, they were probably an inch tops. That was the extent of your turn up, and you turn them, and then you get some braces. So you get some little thin braces from the market again, and you got your loafers, you got your white socks, you got your bleached jeans, you got your Fred Perry top, and you got your short hair and your braces. Boom, hey presto, you're a rude boy. Then if you want to mix it up a bit, shave your head, buy some docks, boom, hey presto, you're a skinhead. Exactly the same look. And of course, not to forget the obligatory Harrington jacket, which was a staple back then. I think everybody had a Harrington, didn't they, at some point or another? You could pick them up off the market for next to nothing, probably about £5 back then. And I was just Googling them actually. I mean, I didn't really know this at the time, but there used to be a golfing jacket, and I think we'll get on to a lot of golf wear later on in this sort of episode, or maybe the next episode. But yes, and it was made famous by Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, who apparently they took the design off the fairway and into the popular fashion in the 1960s, and it became that and the green US Air Force bomber jacket was also another sort of skinhead stroke rude boy sort of necessity of the time. It's funny because, you know, we're talking about style, we're talking about fashion tribes and youth culture and everything else, and you could, you know, if you saw somebody in the distance wearing those or having that look, you instantly knew, you know, what their musical taste was, and you could almost, you know, you could go up to them, you could talk to them, because you'd have the same sort of look. It'd be that instant tribal sort of fix that, like I say, it doesn't really resonate anymore, does it, with kids? Like I say, I have noticed a few. I do notice a lot of people with their own individual style, which I think is fantastic. But there's no real youth tribes massively anymore. It's funny when you go to the Brickyard and places like that, you see a few youngsters in there, and they're into the music, and you can tell they're into the music, but nobody has that look anymore. It's I suppose it's evolved. I mean, you can't all be a dinosaur like me, can you, and just have long hair and live like you're still 20. Which is nothing wrong with that, you know. I don't care what people think about me. It's none of my business what people think of me. It's entirely their view. So, but it's funny. It's, you know, it's a shame, like I've said, but it's also, I don't know. What is it? Is it just mankind becoming all the same? Who knows? Yeah, and those green US Air Force bomber jackets, you could get some really good ones of them. If you got an original one of those, they were awesome. I mean, we used to have this shop. It was up on Broad Street, which was a bit of a rough ass part of town back then. It was pretty much a dive. It was just past the other side of the library in Brum, and you'd go up there. There wasn't a lot up there really. There was a few sort of second-hand shops. But there was this old military shop, and it was like run by this old boy, and man, you couldn't get away with it nowadays, but he had a full SS officer's uniform in the window in a dummy. So can you imagine that? It's like some off that episode of Father Ted. Have you seen that episode of Father Ted when they think he's a racist and he's denying it, and then all of a sudden he kind of gets found in this kind of bunker that's like a homage to like Hitler and the Nazis and that, and it's full of swastikas and that. And this was, I'm not saying this shop was like that, but he had a hell of a lot of Nazi memorabilia in it, a hell of a lot. I mean, he had like SS daggers, and like I said, there was full on German uniforms, a full like officer's uniform, the full black, the real McCoy, do you know what I mean? And we used to spend hours up there because there was like loads of second-hand shops, and like they were just like junk shops really, but you could find all sorts of shit in there, like air rifles. And this guy, right, he had this was just in the shop doorway. It was like a load of canes. They were like walking canes from like, I presume, the Victorian era, because literally you just twist the handle of it, and this knife, this whole, basically a sword, would just be inside. You could just buy it for like a couple of quid and walk around town with it. And it was like just the norm, you know. But I mean, no one got. I think times were more violent than they are now back then, but not as extreme. Do you know what I'm saying? So you get into fights non-stop almost, you know, because it was that tribal thing. So it was like there was still that old-fashioned mods versus rockers type thing. Rude boys versus mods. Everyone seems to be against the mods, and I became a mod, so that was a bit of a masochistic thing to do, wasn't it? But no, I mean, this shop, man, what an insane shop it was. You could go up there and you could get these proper authentic US Air Force bomber jackets, and they were a little bit more pricey, but they were the real deal, you know. You could not tell a difference in the quality compared to the cheap shite you get on the market. So, but all the insane stuff you could get up there, it was just like mental. This like Nazi memorabilia insane shop, and these insane walking sticks that had swords in the middle of them, and he didn't give a shit. He just would tell you anything. There was like apparently deactivated Lugers, and it was just like an Aladdin's cave of like a young kid's sort of heaven of all this military gear. There was like commando knives, but no one really got stabbed then in them days. I mean, like today's kids, they're all stabbing one another or shooting one another. There was none of that then. It was a bit of fisticuffs, bit of a kick in, and that was it. And then obviously, as football hooligans, I think maybe changed that. Did they? I don't know. I've never really been into football, so I think that was the thing that put me off, because I was more into music. I've never been into football, but then seeing like visiting football teams that would come into town on a Saturday, and it was mental. You'd be watching them having bloody knife fights with Stanley blades and Stanley knives down in the Birmingham, the bus depot down in Digbeth, and the scariness really of all these guys that were like coming through town, probably 40, 50, 60 of them all chanting from away. And if you're not into that sort of thing, it's really, really intimidating, And I suppose that's another tribal thing, isn't it? Are we as humans, are we sort of biologically wired to become part of a tribe? I suppose we are, because otherwise we probably wouldn't have survived to where we've got to now. But if you're not part of that particular tribe, and that tribe is intimidating, God, you don't half know about it. It is really, really scary. And I think that the football guys upped the violence, didn't they? He had gone from like a bit of a kick-in, mods versus rockers, bit of a boot-in, maybe have a deck chair broken all over you. That was about it. There's some classic pictures from the 60s, isn't there, on Brighton Beach. But then it became insane. People were like being bricked, and the amount of people are probably even now that are still going around with big scars on their faces, and the intensity of the hatred for another person's kind of belief, and their belief being, their football team from the town that they live in. It's like, that's probably why I never got into it, because I've never been that into much, apart from music and films and books and horror and all the rest of it that I've talked about. Footy never did it for me. I could never understand that passion that people have. I kind of do understand it, don't get me wrong, but it's never grasped me like it has other things have grasped me. So, and then the violence thing just was like, nah man, it's not for me. Fill your boots, lads. I'm going to just go watch a band instead. Yes, it's funny. So you're talking about violence, and it was just a norm. I don't know. You just grew up with it. I think the first time I got beat up, I was about this age. We'd caught the bus, me and my mate, and we were kind of young looking, obviously because we were 12, but we were just in the wrong part of town. So we'd missed the last bus to our part of town, and we'd had to get off at New Oscar, and that's where the orphanage was. And we were just walking home, a couple of little sort of rude boy type lads, and we got off the bus and we were walking. It was about another couple of miles back to our house. We were just walking home, and then we heard these footsteps running up behind us, and then wallop, you get kicked in the back, down on the deck you go, you get a good height in, good kick in, you just turn up into a ball, and they did their bit, and then they left. We got up, carried on walking home, and it was just like, well, what just happened? It did. I mean, that's kind of, is it not glamorising it, but sort of belittling it a little bit, because it did shake you up. I mean, the first time you get a good hiding, it does shake you up, and so we kind of like went home, and then didn't really talk about it that much, but that was one of many scrapes and things I've gotten into over the years, either because of the style of dress I've had, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. 9 times out of 10 it's being in the wrong part of town by yourself or with a few mates, and then the other guys, they come over, there's more of them, hey presto, boom, good kicking, and yeah, but that was it. It was just a bit of a kick in. yeah, you looked worse than what it was. And the next morning, you've got lumps and bumps all over your head, and black eyes and cut lips and everything else. But it was just part and parcel. There was never any threat of a knife. Or, I mean, to be fair, we did get into one knife fight. It was this guy, and he was in the wrong part. He was in our part of town, and he was going out with a girl, and there was a house party, and we crashed this house party, and this guy was in there, and bless him, he didn't really get a major kick, but he obviously he came kind of prepared, I think, more as a deterrent, and this sort of altercation started, and then he pulled out a knife, and we kind of all surrounded him. It was unfair, but anyway, he got a bit of a kick in. We got rid of the knife, and he got a bit of a kick in, but it was just a kick in, but he got his own back massively a few weeks later. So that was the end of it, and then we didn't think nothing of it. And then, for some bizarre reason, my mate says, we need to go down. This is a few years on, so it was about 15ish then. He says, down at the Boar's Head, they do a happy hour, and they probably did a happy hour in all the boozers then, He says, and it's fantastic, and now little did we know that this guy's patch was where the Boar's Head pub is. So we goes down the boozer. We was thinking there's only 3 of us, and we're thinking we're big men, like ordering what did we drink then? Some tan and black. So it was basically bitter and mild. I don't think you can even get mild anymore in a pub, can you? So it was bitter and mild. Banksy's bitter and mild, and so we're there. We're having a couple of, because it's like 5 till 7, something like that. So we're having a couple of pints, and then we look across the bar. Lo and behold, there's Matey Boy with his full crew. It was like, oh shit! Don't look now, but do you remember that lad from the other week? He's over there with all his mates. He was like, oh bollocks! So we started to drink up, and we had to catch the bus home. So we kind of try and sneak out, but obviously this is their patch, this is their manor. So we had no chance. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and it was way too far away to run home or walk home even. So it was just like, all right, we'll go over the road, we'll catch the bus. And we were looking and waiting for the bus. And they're usually about every half an hour. And obviously, as we get there, standing in the bus stop, all of them not pile out. And there seems to be more of them by then. There's about 20 of them. And he got his revenge. We got a right good hiding. God almighty, did I get a good kick in. But I deserved it, you know what I mean? But it was just part and parcel of growing up then. And there was no... they didn't pull knives out, even though he had a knife when it came to our patch. But I think that was just more bravado, probably showing off to his girlfriend. He was in a place that he knew, it sounds bad, he knew he shouldn't be. But it wasn't like that, it was not like LA, it wasn't like South Central, you know what I mean? It was just, although it has become like that now in Birmingham. You've got the Burger Boys and these postcode mafia, whatever they're called, and it's literally, if you're on the opposite side of the road to these other guys, they're going to really actually try and kill you, not just give you a bit of a good hiding. They do physically kill one another, and it's just like, that's just insane, just madness, total madness. So our little scrappy things, and I was chatting to a guy the other day about this. He says, although probably life was more violent, it was just fighting. It wasn't you weren't trying to physically actually kill one another like they are now, but there wasn't the drug problem that there is now that there was then. It was literally just drinking. So that's obviously escalated the problem even more so, because if there's money to be made, you've got to make a name for yourself. Times are completely different, aren't they? I'm talking, so this was the 80s. Times was just a lot different, hell of a lot different. So I think after that sort of rude boy era that I went through, and that kind of still stayed with you. It's not that, baggy trousers was that was like a soundtrack for a generation, and I'm guessing every guy my age that's listening to this, you all resonate with Baggy Trousers. It was like your school. Naughty boys in naughty schools, headmasters breaking all the rules. It was just, that was like our school, because every school back then was like Grange Hill. It was just an insane free-for-all. So Baggy Trousers was just like down. It was just, it hit the nail on the head perfectly. And if you were living in London, if you were living in Birmingham, if you were living up here, it was that, you know, they got it bang on. So I think that always stayed, you know, and it's just become part of you growing up. And there's loads of guys I know now. I mean, I went to see a band the other week. I actually went to see Bad Manners. I think only Buster Bloodvessel was probably the original member, but that was down at the Brickyard the other week, and they were good. They played all the hits, still got it in him, kinda. But they had a support act, and they were like a cover band, and they played all of the sort of every single ska hit from that era that you could think of, and that was awesome because the crowd would go mental. We all know the words, and it's like, you know, this was what we on 1980, so 30, no, nearly 40 years ago, isn't it? And we're still, yeah, over 40 years ago, and it was still kind of like everyone knows the words. It still gives you that instant reaction, that instant buzz, takes you right back to the day. And it's just, you know, that's the power of music, isn't it? It's the that's why I love music so much, because it's such a powerful, what would you say, thing. It just doesn't do it any justice, does it? It's just a powerful form, a form that allows, you know, it can bring you to tears, it can make you laugh, it can fill you with ecstasy and joy. And then going back to what this episode was supposed to be about, going back to what we started on, the sort of self-expression that you can relate with that particular form of music, you know, hence the youth cultures that we've had throughout the last few decades. And it's all been about that sort of self-expression of the teenagers and the young adults, and it's all been tied so very closely to music, because it was, you know, it was their individual, it was their thing. It was something that the generation before didn't get. Like, we don't get this next generation coming along so much, but we shouldn't particularly, because this is their time, this is their thing. So even though I do like to keep up to speed on things, but it's not for me to, you know, my time hasn't passed particularly, but it's up to you guys now to take the reins and to move forward, and then for your generation to be looked back on and saying, oh, man, look at them in the 2020s, weren't they fantastic? Remember when they did this and they did that? That'd be awesome if that could happen. And yet again, we seem to have gone slightly off-piste on talking about me and my sort of reinventions and sort of journeys through youth that I had. So let's get back to it and get to the mod stage. Yeah, I think with the mod thing is because I was in that band. So if anyone's listened to any of the previous episodes, you'll know I was in a sort of R&B band from, and we're not talking R&B, we're talking British R&B from like the 60s. So this was like bands like the Small Faces, Spencer Davis Group, the Yardbirds, all that sort of era of sort of music that was coming through. That was, you know, we're not talking like Mariah Carey and stuff like that. It was sort of old R&B, not what you class nowadays. So, which is quite confusing, isn't it? It's like, why just rename something after something else? Why not come up with a new name? But what do I know? So anyway, yeah, so I was in that sort of rude boy sort of era, and it was getting a little bit stale, and you know, the specials were kind of split. The special second album really didn't do it. I don't think even Madness's album did it as well, you know. What was the second album for Madness? Hang on, let me just Google it. Good old Google. Yeah, so it was called Absolutely, and it had Baggy Trousers on. Well, obviously I knew that because One Step Beyond didn't. One Step Beyond was like seminal album. It's slightly obviously for me, we got into it a little bit later, didn't we? So we're talking 1980, but yeah, great. But yeah, then you've got Embarrassment, which is on that, and Return of the Lost Palmer 7, and Ernie's quite a good song. And then, but most of them, they're kind of like, if they came on the radio, if they came on, you'd go, oh yeah, that's Madness from that second album, but it didn't quite, resonate with me. It got a bit stale, and I don't know. There was a lot of it probably past its peak. The specials were doing the same sort of thing, and they'd gone a little bit arty-farty, should I say. They'd gone into the Fun Boy 3, and it was a little bit more. It got from that, like, Too Much Too Young, which was like, Too Much Too Young. It was like, proper gritty, dancey, really great stuff. And then Fun Boy 3 come along with, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. It's like, there's no comparison. And his hair, what was going on with his hair? And the beat, I've just googled how many hits they had in the 80s, the early 80s. It was like, insane. And so, like, getting up there, really, like, gritty, in your face, proper dancey, good stuff. And then they kind of morphed into the Fine Young Cannibals. It's like, this is shit. So I think it's time for a change. So it was, the mod era began. It wasn't much of a stretch really to change, and kind of got into, because me and my mate called Greg, we're still good mates even to this day. The Terrible Two. We got up to some shenanigans, should I say, over the years, and it's a bit. To be fair, I'm surprised Greg's still alive. Man, the hedonistic lifestyle he's had, he puts bloody Genghis Khan to shame. it's unbelievable. And he's still going strong to this day. But anyway, me and him, we were like the Terrible Two. We were like thick as thieves at school, and afterwards as well. But he had older brothers, and the one older brother was kind of around in the 60s, so he was like one of the proper original mods. So he had all the authentic kind of gear, and like again, so we're talking early 80s. There was that sort of, as well as that ska renaissance, there was also like a mod revival. So there was bands like The Jam, obviously, which came from that sort of indie kind of punk band, but the sort of mod culture kind of latched onto them, and they were kind of quite moddy, to be fair. You would class them as a mod band, 100%. And then there was Secret Fair. Everyone goes into the Who. Quadrophenia came out, so that created another mass of sort of mod culture. Scooters became a big thing again, and it kind of like, it piqued my interest, you know what I mean, because it was that style thing again. So it was the music and the style, and obviously I was playing in the bands, so I was surrounded by loads of mods and modettes, we used to call them, which were like girls, and they had fantastic style. They had like sort of nice kind of bob type haircuts, so sometimes quite extreme bobs. So like skinhead girls, they had them like a sort of like a buzz cut, you'd call it nowadays, don't you? So they had a buzz cut, and then sort of like ringlets, not ringlets, like feathery bits down the sides. Have you ever seen This Is England? You look at the girls in This Is England, and that's what it was like. In fact, This Is England kind of got that era to a T, absolutely to a T. When we used to be going to the local disco, it was called Winley Disco, and you'd have to walk through this part of the town, and there's all these skinheads would be there at the top, and they'd all be glue sniffing and getting hammered. That was basically the drug of choice back then. It was either booze or sniffing glue, and not that I did either. Well, I did booze obviously, but I've never sniffed glue, and mainly because it was just like, it's just really all these horror stories of people dying instantly from it. But anyway, I digress. So you'd have to walk past these skinheads, and they were like probably only about, you think we was 12ish, 13, thinking we were the big men, but really just children still. And then you'd be walking past these lads that were probably 17, 18, 19, probably younger than that, maybe. But you know, when you're that age gap is so much different, isn't it? Now these guys were big, they were mean looking, they had loads of homemade tattoos on them. A skinhead is like a scary looking thing. It's just, you know, thing. But a skinhead it's really an intimidating look, and so they'd come up to you off the tits on glue. You could smell it, Evo stick, and there was bags of carrier bags of Evo stick dumped all over the place, cans of special brew everywhere, and Tennant Super, and so they'd come wandering up to you, and you knew what was going to happen, and they'd ask you for change. They wanted 10p. 10p was a lot of money then, and you'd say, "Oh, sorry, I haven't got any," but they'd make you jump up and down. You'd all be there jumping up and down, and then they'd hear you change, and then they'd make you take so you basically were getting mugged. so yeah, that was another part of living up in the city. Fantastic, huh? And then drapesing. I don't know if drapesing was a thing up here or anywhere else in the country, but it was definitely in Birmingham, and it became more of a big thing when that what they called the casuals kind of era started. So that would have been sort of mid to late 80s, wasn't it? You know, them casuals, the sort of football hooligans, sort of when everyone started wearing golfing clothing, essentially, wasn't it? It was like Burberry. Everyone wore Farrah trousers, and the trainers became a big thing, didn't they? Then so it was like Adidas and Sergio Tacchini. That was a big thing. I remember that. It was never anything I got into because it just wasn't my. It was too nice. Do you know what I mean? Even though they were mental and they were kicking shit out of each other each Saturday and any chance they got, but it just was. It wasn't. You know, rebellious enough for me. You were dressing like you were going to play 18 holes on the golf course, but then kicking shit out of each other. But anyway, them guys, they used to drapes one another. So which drapesing means was that literally, if you had the latest Adidas top or I don't think they'd take your trousers off you, but they'd nick your trainers and they'd nick your clothes and just leave you up with what they didn't want. So yeah, that was drapesing, that was called. So that was another interesting part of but no rockers or bikers that I used to hang around ever got drapes. I don't think anyone wanted to add leathers or or dirty horrible jeans. So but yeah, that was the thing. Crazy, huh? What a world we live in. But and then they used to rob the local sort of gents outfitters kind of shops, because obviously they just run in, grab loads of clothes and run out. And I suppose the guys, they'd be middle-aged guys, not ever probably seen any teenagers in there for loving the money, because why would you? And then all of a sudden it became a fashion thing, and they'd be going in, they'd just nick it because they knew they'd be able to sell it to someone had somewhere be able to fit into whatever they'd robbed. So that was another sort of thing that used to happen quite frequently. Actually, it was quite a big thing. So that drapesing and getting mugged by skinheads, that was just a normal Friday and Saturday night anyway onto the disco. But then we tweaks with the skinheads that if we put our change into different pockets rather than having one pocket full of money, we just split it between all our pockets, and then you jump up and down, you didn't have anything, and a lot of the time you could just run away from them anyway, because they were basically like extras from the Living Dead, the Walking Dead, you know what I mean? They were zombified. Just you could tell, I could probably see it about looking at you, there's probably about 10 of us, you know. There was only one of us, but you know what I mean? They were that cross-eyed and boss-eyed, but so scary looking. So yeah, anyway, getting back to me and Greg, so Greg's brother, like I say, he was one of the original mods. So Greg had this fabulous sort of knowledge that his brother would pass down, and you know, the amazing record collection of all the originals, you know, singles, and it was, you felt like you were the real deal. Do you know what I mean? Because there was a big thing. There were like plastic mods, so there was it was always a big thing back then. If you're a plastic whatever, you're a plastic goth or plastic new romantic, or you're a plastic, blah blah blah. It meant you weren't authentic. You didn't have the real. You didn't quite have the real look, or you didn't have the authentic this, or you didn't have the authentic that. It was pretty petty and stupid, really. But you know what kids are like. So a lot of the mods back then, they're just like a green fishtail parka with, the obligatory Air Force symbol on the back with the WHO going through it, and a jam patch on your arm, and maybe who else would there have been back then? The Lambretters, that was another one, I forgot about them. So, and they'd just have maybe a pair of jeans on, and maybe a Fred Perry top or a shirt. Button down collared shirts were kind of in vogue then as well. That pencil tie sometimes, little sort of page boy type haircut, so a sort of no fades or nothing like that then. There was nothing like that then. It was just like a sort of short back and sides with the side part in, and maybe a pair of black Docs, maybe, or brown Doc shoes. That was about it. That was the look. That was the sort of general look. But then obviously me and Greg, and not just me and Greg, but there's a lot of people that became a lot more authentic. So we hunted out these proper authentic. It was always American sort of military wear that was part of the equation. So we got these proper authentic US parkas, and a fox tail on it, no patches or nothing on the back. He kept it completely clean. And then we had like two-tone suits, so they were like, they changed the colour as the light hit them, and sort of not winkle picker shoes, but they had quite a point, a bit like sort of Paul Weller wears a pair on a few of the album covers, and you could get them relatively cheap, like again down in the market. There was loads of knockoff gear down the market, and that was the look. And we used to go to this cafe again, kind of Broad Street area of town, so the back of the library. I don't know if anyone knows Birmingham Library. I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was like this enormous amphitheatre of steps that you walked up to get to the library itself. Then there was like a bit of an underpass that took into Broad Street, which is the other part of town. And so we used to go there every Saturday, and again, what we were now, so we was 13, 14, and we'd be going, catching a bus, walking through town, giving it loads, thinking we were the big I am. And then you get into this milk bar, and there'd be a few scooters, because there'd be a few older lads in there, all with L plates on, but there'd be a few nice little scooters, and a lot of them were like exactly like the ones off Quadrophenia that Jimmy drove, with all the mirrors on, and sort of like a big aerials at the back with the foxtail hanging off the end, and Union Jacks on the side panels, and all that sort of malarkey. And it was again another, that feeling of belonging, and being part of this tribe. And you'd walk in, and everybody would like, everyone would like acknowledge you, and it'd be like, all right, mate, and it was just it was great to be part of that thing. And then we'd all get out, and we'd all go back into town, so different to weekends, but it'd be like, I suppose it's not dissimilar to what I was talking about earlier with the football guys. They go through town chanting and that. So we'd go through town, we'd get off, and we'd start going, "We are the mods, we are the mods, we are the mods." And it was just like, we go walking through town, and then usually 9 times out of 10, a load of rude boys, because for some reason rude boys and mods started scrapping. Like I said earlier, everyone wanted to fight the mods. So I think because everyone just thought they were so neat and nice, and they were a bunch of fannies, but I think they had a bit of a shock when push comes to shove. You know what people are like. And so yeah, there was a few tussles, but nothing, just nothing major. Just a bit of a laugh more than anything. Nobody got hurt. It was just that sort of teenage bravado that most teenage boys go through, isn't it? So that was a good laugh. And then, like I say, back then you could get into pubs a hell of a lot easier than you can nowadays. So we were getting into the boozers, and there was a couple of pubs in town that were particularly, they used to have these all-nighters where they used to have like sort of 60s R&B and Motown nights, and they used to go on all night, hence the name all-nighters. And God, they were insane. It was like surprising how you could probably last till about 3 o'clock-ish, and then you're starting to flag, and there'd be people kind of on the stairs, because this pub was on, it was like a really small pub, but it was on 3 floors, so you'd have to walk up to the stairs. And I played there a few times when I was in the band. Got a bit of a residency there, and it had a bit of a following there. It was a bit of a sort of star in there. It sounds so bloody, what's the word? Just pathetic, doesn't it, to say that? But no, it was all right. I liked it in there, and we had these all-nighters, and it was like, and then you get the Northern Soul guys that would come down, so like the Scooter Boys, so they're like an offshoot again. They're kind of a cross between sort of like a skinhead and a mod and a rude boy, you know what I mean? A bit of a mixture of everything. And I quite like Scooter Boys, especially I like some of their, because they really sort of, some of them they stripped the scooters right back and they made them into little choppers, and it was that sort of artistic flair and that individuality that I liked about them guys. And they'd be usually big into like Northern Soul and Motown, and some of the dancing they did was unbelievable. So it was usually a DJ. There was very rarely there was a live band on. So these DJs had sort of taken turns throughout the night, and it was awesome. So there'd be people. It must have been what it must have been like. That's how it felt. It felt like you were back in the 60s. You know, we were living this idyllic sort of life of like teenagers back in the 60s, and we were giving it all these dance moves that we'd copied off Quadrophenia. And it was, because obviously there was no internet or nothing in them days, so it was literally what you saw on television. So if you saw the odd documentary, and it was just like, and that's how you got, through books and things, that's how you got the style, that's where you got the haircuts from. So one of my haircuts that I had for that, I've always been into haircuts. Do you know what I've never done though? I've never dyed my hair. I've never ever dyed my hair. I've sprayed it once with this sort of silver spray, but I've never dyed it. I don't know why. I suppose I've never been in a youth tribe that warranted dyeing your hair. I'd never got into that. Back in the 80s, there was like a fashion of doing highlights, but that was more your footballer types, and I was never into that, so that wasn't my scene. And then when it came sort of into the metal scene, when I was like late 80s, I wasn't into hair metal, so I wasn't into like your Bon Jovis and all that sort of stuff, and your Skid Rows and your Motley Crues. I was the Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Metallica boy. So Exodus, all sorts of the heavier stuff, and none of that like warranted ever dyeing your hair. I was never a goth, and so I didn't ever have to dye my hair black. So it's funny, I've never dyed my hair. Probably I never will. I'm going grey gracefully, and I just wish I could go grey quicker. I'd look a bit like, get me Gandalf look going on quicker. And it's funny because back then, you were there, and we were in the was it the Rum Runner, I think it was called back then, and you were giving it all this, trying to be as cool as you possibly could. That was the thing with mods. You had to be like super cool. You know what I mean? You couldn't be. You weren't pissed out your head and being stupid. You were drinking shorts. You weren't. A pint glass was very uncouth. It wasn't the look that you wanted to cultivate. So you were drinking sort of shorts. You were trying to be sort of a bit more sophisticated, and that came across with your dancing as well. So you'd be out on the dance floor and you'd be giving sort of very well. If you look at some of the 60s videos on YouTube, you'll get the idea of what I'm talking about. It was kind of a very classy movement, I think the mod movement was, and I'm glad I kind of flirted with that for a couple of years, because it did give you another sense of style that you wouldn't have had and that you couldn't have carried on through life if you hadn't gone through that era. But then getting back to my hair, and so I had this like bouffant sort of haircut. So it was basically, I've got really curly hair, right, and I've got this stupid cowlick that I've hated all my life because I've never been able to do anything with it, and my hair gets to a certain length and then all of a sudden it just like springs onto the top of my head. I mean, if my hair was straight it'd probably be down halfway down my back by now, but it seems to just constantly boing just above my shoulders. It doesn't seem to want to defy gravity and go any lower than my shoulders. It kind of does now, to be fair. But so I had this cut. Now Greg, right, he had dead straight hair, and all of the fashion styles that me and him went through, his hair was always immaculate because he had this perfect, and I had always had this stupid bloody cowlick that I had to somehow tame. And then obviously back then there wasn't the sort of hair products that there is now, so you had to improvise and do certain things. We'll get into that in another episode, I think. And but yeah, so I had this sort of, it was basically imagine, because you didn't have I didn't have sideboards back then. I was very hairless, back then. I don't know if anyone's seen that picture of me that I posted when I had a mullet, but I've got the most weirdest little moustache. In fact, when I did try and grow a beard when I was about 17, 18, I looked more like the Laughing Cavalier, which is that's what they used to call me actually, because I thought I looked cool with this little goatee and this little Errol Flynn type moustache. And that wasn't an Errol Flynn type moustache by choice. That was just, that's all I could grow. So because I couldn't grow sideboards, and I was only sort of young anyway, I had to sort of improvise and use my hair to make this sort of sideboard look. So I kind of had my hair cut around my ears, and it was kind of like not longish, but just above the collar, say, right at the back, and then round the ears, but then these long wispy bits at the front that were made to look like a sort of sideboard, and then that went up to like this fringe that came across the top of your eyebrows, then back down to the other side, which had the other wispy side with the other fake sideboard. And then you'd kind of put a middle part in, so you'd have like this block fringe, and then you'd have this middle part in a bit to roughly the middle of your back of your head, and then you'd kind of have this bouffant that you would create by sort of back combing your hair and putting copious amounts of hairspray on to keep it in position. And then, I mean, we were that anal, right? We used to catch the bus, and we wouldn't even sit down on the bus, so we'd like upstairs. Now, everybody upstairs on the bus back then, you sit down, standing up was downstairs. So we'd like be on the bus, and it'd be packed, right? So everyone would be going into town on a Saturday night, and it'd be all sorts of people on there. So like, sort of normal, sort of disco-y type people, goths, punks, rude boys, skinheads. But there was never any hassle because everyone was going out, everyone was in a good mood. It was late, so it just proves what alcohol does, doesn't it? Because it was always later that the aggro started. But anyway, so we'd all be there, we'd get on the bus, and we wouldn't sit down because we didn't want to crease our shirts or crease our trousers. I mean, what a pair of dickheads. It's like, I mean, imagine that. Who gives a shit when you walk into the club? It's pitch black anyway, no one can see really what you're wearing. And there's me with this silly little boof on the haircut. Greg had the same, but because I had this insane, still have got this insane cowlick, mine just never looks right, you know what I mean? Because I had this wave, this kind of demi wave going through the front of my head. Oh man, but I thought it looked good at the time, so that's all that matters at the end of the day. And it was a good laugh. I really enjoyed that part of that sort of thing that I was into. The fact that he was coupled with the band, and you're getting that slightly bit older, and like I said, the girls, they're so stylish, the modettes they were called. Oh, I've said that already, haven't I? And modettes, fucking hell. So they were they used to wear usually sort of like these sort of 3/4 trouser type things with like these little neat shoes, and would be socks. I didn't really take much notice to pair, but then they usually had like a nice sort of jacket on, and the hair, like I said, was sometimes in this, them bobs where they really go up at the back. I still like that haircut now. It's kind of like, and it kind of comes down almost like a helmet, for want of a better description, but it doesn't look like a helmet. It looks really stylish, I think. It's like a really cool bob, and it's almost shaved sometimes at the back, isn't it? But it comes down, and I think obviously if you've got dead straight hair, it's such a sexy feminine look, I think. But they used to have that sort of haircut. It was quite prevalent. Just bobs in general, I think, was quite a sort of a modest sort of look, wasn't it? But yeah, and their pencil skirts and just the way they moved as well. It was very, very elegant. It was like that Italian sort of 60s, that Italian job sort of style. Do you know what I'm trying to get to? That sort of that lost era that doesn't exist anymore. It was sort of like panache and style, and that sort of exuded sort of elegance and sort of feminine sexuality. It was really, it was fantastic to sort of to look at. But you didn't just sit and it wasn't like a thing. Everyone, guys and girls, everyone got up on the dance floor and danced together. And you didn't necessarily have to dance with a member of the opposite sex either. It was just, you just got up there and did your thing, and you just got lost in the music. And I think you go to most Northern Soul nights now, and you can see that happening now. But I think, it was just great, and there wasn't any. Whether I don't know, was I just stupid and naive, and that's why I didn't ever get a girl, because I just missed all the signals. More than likely, because I was stupid. Too busy moving and grooving to the music and getting lost in the music, and completely all these signals that I'm getting are just going right over the top of my head. And I think then from my next sort of reinvention after that, we kind of, me and Greg, it was always me and him, we kind of morphed into like a psychobilly kind of era. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it's I think I'll probably save this for another episode actually, because this kind of morphs well into the start of going to see live music. Because prior to this, I was in bands and I was kind of making music with other people, but then we weren't particularly going to see a lot of bands. But then this next stage of my sort of youth that we got into was where there was some of the very first concerts I went to, and it kind of like took it up another level, you know what I mean? And we're still involved with a lot of style and a lot of sort of fashion and do-it-yourself sort of stuff. So yeah, well, I think we'll save that for another episode. I mean, after all, I've been waffling on to this nearly just over an hour, so I think you're bored of listening to me by now. But as usual, thank you so much for taking the time for listening to me. If anything's resonated with you about your youth, or you want to know a bit more about what it was really like in the 80s, if you're just a youngster listening to this, drop us a line. We can get in touch. I'll have a chat. I always reply to all the emails, all the text messages I get. It's really, very heartwarming actually to get a lot of the feedback that I am getting. It spurs me on to do more of this. So, as per usual, thank you so much for listening. And from me and everybody else at the Caravan of Love, which is basically just me and the scary doll. Till next time, take care, love you all. Bye for now. Ladies and gentlemen, Teddy Tim has left the building.